concluding part of our series on Ghana's emergency medical system, and our colleague Martha Crensolakwa is exploring Ghana's ambulance service and how it reacts to emergencies.
Professor Ahmed Zakaria explains how the emergency medical system works in Ghana.
Generally, the concept of EMS, which is the Emergency Medical Service System, is out of hospital acute medical care, and it is a system that is normally responsible to provide any form of emergency care system outside the hospital setting. And internationally, we have two main types. We have the Anglo-American system, which is practiced mainly in England and then US. And then we have the Franco-German system, which is practiced in other European countries. The difference is that with the Franco-German system, they use medical doctors and nurses to provide the out-of-hospital acute medical care.
What do you call paramedics?
No, the paramedic system is the second one I'm explaining. The paramedic system is the Anglo-American system. Here, they don't use doctors, they use the paramedics. And both systems have their advantages and disadvantages. For Ghana, for example, we are using the Anglo-American system, which is a paramedic system. Research has shown that none of the systems is more superior to the other once the systems really work. The Anglo-American system, they use a system called scoop and run. What it means is that the paramedics arrive at the scene of an accident. They quickly provide a basic first aid and straight to the hospital.
Okay.
And the reason is that they try to beat what they call the golden hour rule, because it's assumed that when there is a trauma, within an hour, you should be able to get the patient to the hospital and to theater, because the more you delay, the more irreversible tissue damage is caused. In the other case of the Franco-German system, they call it stand and play. Here, they take the emergency department to the field. So there, they have enough time, they can play, they manage, and they just go transfer straight to the ward. Now, in settings where you don't have many doctors, it's better to go for the Anglo-American system, and that's why we have opted for it. With that, there are two levels: the basic life support ambulance system and then the advanced life support ambulance system. Because even the paramedics, you know, we have basic emergency medical technicians and we have advanced emergency medical technicians, and then we have paramedics. So those two concepts exist. So we are using the Anglo-American system.
Now the dispatch center, the call comes there directly,
Sure.
And then you make a decision.
When the call gets to the emergency center, then they will then interrogate you. They have a systematized system of interrogation. Ask the location, what is wrong with the patient and all that. And then they will dispatch the ambulance to you. And when they arrive, definitely they start with all the basic first aid that you may need.
This is the master control room of the National Ambulance Service. I am here to experience what it means to be in the master control room, to dispatch an ambulance and to see to it that it saves another life of perhaps your relative. You can join me. Good afternoon, madam.
Good afternoon, madam.
My name is Martha from JoyNews, and I am here to speak with you. You are?
I'm Senior Advanced EMT Matilda Nate, in charge of the control room.
The National Ambulance Service Master Control Room serves as the National Ambulance Dispatch Center and also for the Greater Accra region. There are 7 phones here serving the purpose of responding to distress calls. Matilda Nate is in charge of the dispatch center. She explains what a typical day at the center looks like.
At the control room is to receive calls, and then we look at the nearest ambulance station where the call is coming from. Then we dispatch the ambulance to the scene.
This is the master control room of the Ghana Ambulance Service. It does not only serve Accra, it serves the national also. Now, looking at this room, I'm told is a 10 by 8 feet square meter room, and you have about 7 phones here. You have a printer, a desktop computer, a tray, some books to log in calls that come in, cabinets to file folders, and other things. I am told there are 3 or more officers on duty at a time. You have day and night officers who come in to receive all the calls around the country to be able to dispatch ambulance 24 hours, to meet your needs. But is this room conducive enough for the national control room of the Ghana Ambulance Service? There were at least enough ambulance stations across the country to make response time close to the world standard. But with the depletion of the fleet, many stations have been closed down.
The system didn't exist until 2004 when we started with a pilot program. And the pilot program started in 7 stations across the country, at the time just in only 3 regions. And with the pilot program being a success, we scaled up to 24 stations. And currently, as we speak now, we have 130 stations across the country. And now, if you look at it from the perspective of a system that did not exist, you will see that it is not doing badly at all. The only thing is that we could have done better. The other thing is that currently, there are many districts which still don't have the system yet. So we are still gradually increasing. But the reason we always prefer to look at the cup half full and not half empty is that from a humble beginning of nothing, we have 130 stations. From a humble beginning of just 57 staff, now we have 1,700. Initially, we were doing our training at the Fire Academy and Training School. Fortunately, now we have our own paramedic and emergency care training school. Exactly, at Tinkin Council in Ashanti region, where we now solely do training for paramedics. And it's also in future supposed to be a facility where doctors, nurses can go for short courses as refresher programs in emergency care to equip themselves and to improve their skills.
The out-of-hospital acute medical care system in Ghana is intended to beat the golden hour rule to get critical cases to the hospital for trauma management.
First is the oxygen delivery devices. This is the oxygen cylinder. It contains the oxygen. Now we connect the oxygen through either a nasal cannula or a simple face mask. And then we give this when you have a patient who is not breathing properly or a patient that needs assisted ventilation. So now, when you connect your nasal cannula, you come and open the flow meter. So this is what we use to regulate the oxygen that you are giving to the patient in need of it. Okay. We also have a suction machine. This is used to suction fluid from the mouth of a patient. Usually when you have unconscious patients, there's always a probability that their tongue may fall back. You have to open the airway. Sometimes there is saliva in there. You have to suction. So you connect a suction catheter here. You put the machine on, and then it sucks the air from the person's mouth. Yeah. We also have an equipment we call the BVM. That is the bag valve mask. It is used to give artificial ventilation to somebody who is not breathing on his own. So let's say if you have a patient who is not breathing, you fix the mask in front of the patient's face, and then you give. So that's it.
We monitor the patients. We give secondary assessment in the ambulance. If I talk of secondary assessment, if we do ongoing checkups by checking the BP, the temperature, the sugar level, the SpH2, to make sure that the patient is stable till we get to the hospital.
Commercial vehicles, especially taxis, have become the major means of transferring patients who need critical care in place of an ambulance. But in one of the instances I'm about to narrate, the story turned fatal. On one Saturday evening in February 2017 at Tetegu near Waja, a man, his wife, and unborn baby lost their lives. The story started when a woman in labor was referred to the Kolebu Teaching Hospital when health officials at a clinic at Kaswa realized she had complications. In the absence of an ambulance at the clinic, The husband made a difficult decision to convey his wife in the company of an aunt and a cousin to the Korle-Bu Teaching Hospital, but that journey turned fatal. The man who was driving, his wife in labor and the unborn baby all died in an accident at Tetegu. The two other family members survived the accident, but find it too difficult to talk about. Motorists would at least heed to the siren of the ambulance team, but may not do same for a private or a commercial vehicle, calling for that attention. Is it possible for every facility that has the capacity of up to a community hospital to have an ambulance? What is the arrangement? Why can't we have an ambulance per health facility?
You know, every health facility is supposed to make their own arrangement to have an ambulance. They call it facility-based ambulance system. That is different from the national ambulance service. The facility-based ambulance system, ideally, is supposed to be a vehicle placed at the facility and ready to transport patients to higher facilities, especially when they know they'll be referring cases. So my advice is any hospital that knows that it doesn't have the capability to attend to all cases should be able to have their facility ambulance for the inter-hospital transfer. Currently, what we do is that we provide both the inter-facility transfer and then pre-hospital emergencies as well.
Yes.
And that sometimes creates difficulties. And so some of the hospitals already have their own facilities, their own ambulances. With them, they normally don't have this problem. Those that don't have are the ones who rely on us. And so what we normally advise is...
But you don't have enough to support them.
Absolutely, we don't. Even we don't have enough for the pre-hospital care, much more for the facility ambulances. So most of the time, we end up spending more time even in the inter-facility transfers, more than even the pre-hospital emergencies.
Because I'm sure you rather focus on inter-facility transfer than, let's say, an emergency call that comes in and you are now going to struggle and locate where
that's the ideal, because ideally, that's our priority. Because once you're already in a facility, at least you are receiving some level of care.
Okay.
But outside the facility, there is no care. So that's where the priority normally should be.
So can we have a national policy on that? Is it likely? Is it possible?
Oh, it is possible. It's just a matter of collaboration. And once we collaborate, we should be able to really maximize our resources. Currently, some facilities do have. And once the collaboration exists, even those facilities can be networked and linked up so that they can support each other. The situation where you have an ambulance, and that was why the concept of now sending ambulances to facilities was discouraged. Because once you send an ambulance to a health facility, it becomes the property of the facility. In some cases, some even use them as utility vehicles. But when you create an ambulance station within the community, it serves both the facility and the community. Absolutely. So that's really the ideal situation. So if you have one vehicle, rather than placing it in the health facility, it's better you create an ambulance station, either placing it in the facility or outside the facility, but it should serve the whole community as well as the health facility. In the next 10 years, we want to have what they call the rural emergency medical service system, where even within the rural community, the CHIPS compound will be linked up to the ambulance service, where definitely transportation to higher levels will be easy to secure. We also wish that once the country starts running a domestic airline, air ambulance becomes mandatory. And the reason is that we don't have. The reason is that should anything happen during the flight, it's catastrophic. It can be a disaster that really can create high casualties. So air ambulance becomes mandatory. Then in terms of the boat ambulance system, that also should be encouraged because of the river. Absolutely, boat ambulance system. Absolutely.
Wow, that would be great. But if we put all these measures in place, does that mean the Ghana Ambulance Service is going to be the world-class ambulance service?
That's our vision. If you look at our vision, that is the vision. Absolutely. Because even currently in the sub-region, one of the few countries with a well-organized, established ambulance system is the Ghana one. Forget about all the challenges. It's normally the system you look at. The system exists. The challenges can always be surmounted. because with time, once you get new fleet, all these problems will be a thing of the past. But the system now, if you look at it, it really compares to any of the advanced systems. Because what comprises the system is a system where you have a toll-free number, a system where you have a dispatch center, a system where we have paramedics providing the pre-hospital care. All this exists.
You have all.
We have all. And a system where you have your own paramedic and emergency care training school, which we have. All you need now is just to perfect the system, and then you are in business.
As a matter of policy, perhaps, it is time for every hospital to acquire an ambulance in case, just in case of an emergency.
Incredible. That's the end of that series produced by Martha Krenzel Aqua, where she explores Ghana's ambulance service and how it reacts to emergencies. We've witnessed a lot through the story that she's told for the past. This is the fourth in the series for the past 4 days. What are your own reactions? Have you had any experience at all with the ambulance service? Send me an SMS with the number that will be on the screen shortly. You can send me a regular text message. But I did promise you yesterday we're going to have a conversation on the back of this. Just by the way, what's the emergency number if you want to call the ambulance service? What is that number if you want to call the ambulance service? Let me just introduce to you my guest. We'll get into some of the matters shortly. Mr. Foster Anson Brejan is Head of Operations, National Ambulance Service. Good morning to you.
Good morning, madam.
We've been telling your story for the past 4 days. Very interesting how it works at the ambulance service. We've seen the frustrations when patients are taken. We saw, the Kolebu Teaching Hospital where a patient was taken, and the feedback was that they didn't have beds, and so they had to keep the trolley, you call it. And for hours, over 2 hours, your men were still waiting for the trolley because they couldn't just return without it, We've seen the prank calls where people just call the emergency number when there's nothing happening. Yeah. So we appreciate all the frustrations. And then also the lane. There's no emergency lane. There's no bus ambulance lane. So you have to stay in the traffic sometimes with the patients on board. But let's start off with, how many buses do you have right now?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning to your viewers. In total, we have 134 ambulance stations.
134?
Yes, and each ambulance station has an ambulance to man that station.
If you say an ambulance station,
yes,
what does it mean?
An ambulance station is a complete setup of a station where we have a well-equipped ambulance and a trained personnel who man the ambulance, and from that point, they receive calls and response calls from that station.
Okay. So in Accra, it's not just one central point?
Not at all. Accra alone, we have about, within Accra itself, we have about 6 stations dotted within the municipality.
Okay.
Yeah.
And out of the 6, how many cars do you have?
Each station has 1 vehicle.
1.
Yeah. So in Accra, you can talk about Accra City, that's Makola, where the fire station is. We have a station there. We have a station at Ridge Hospital.
Okay.
We have a station at the airport. We have a station at Mamprobi Polyclinic. We have a station at Atomic Clinic.
Okay.
We have a station there. We have a station at Pantan. It's also located at the hospital. And we also have a station at Amasaman. That's also located at the hospital.
Okay.
So all these places, we have ambulances being manned by well-trained emergency medical technicians.
Okay, but you've mentioned one each of all these
locations.
Yes,
so for now, every station has 1 ambulance because we don't have enough ambulances.
Okay, is the situation different, the way you describe it, in the Ashanti region, for instance, in the Volta region, in the Central region?
It's similar. For Ashanti region, we also have a total, in the whole region, we have a total of 17 stations.
Okay.
Out of the 17 stations, about 5 of them are within the Kumasi metropolitan area. Yeah, we are talking about Konfanochi, we have a station there. We have a station at Mampontin, we have a station at the airport. We also have a station at the stadium.
Okay.
We also have a station at Ejiso. We have a station at Konongo, a station at Jaso. You know, the stations are actually strategically located along the main road corridors, so that they will be able to respond to all road traffic crashes as early as possible.
Okay, so all these stations you mentioned in the Ashanti region also have a bus each?
Yes.
Okay, are they all in good shape?
Some of them are not in good shape because already, if my boss has been explaining, that the vehicles are over 5 years now, and as a result, most of them have become weak, and for that matter, some have broken down.
So how many active buses do you have then?
Currently, we will talk about 70 of them, but all of them are not on road at the same time.
Not all the 70?
Yeah, on road at the same time.
Okay.
Just because as they work now, because most of them are not working, the few stations which are working overstretch the vehicles. So they will move for 1 or 2 cases. It has a problem. It comes back to the workshop, and then we have to work on them, and another ones also go back. So it is like some are working, some comes back to the workshop, and then it continues like that.
So is it that you can't fix the broken buses?
Not that we can't fix them, but some are beyond just a normal repairs. For instance, if the engine has broken down, it becomes a challenge. In that case, you rather need to have a complete new engine to fix it in, or something you call the overhauling. But sometimes it is, if you look at the cost-benefit analysis, getting overhauling an engine which may not last becomes a problem. So you have to look at the best way of
entirely new bus. Recently, we heard, in fact, it's something that's been around, that some buses were purchased for the ambulance service. However, they don't meet the required specification. Is there anything new that you've heard, from those buses?
For now, there's not much because it is still under investigations. And since we've not actually received them into our fleet, we cannot talk much about them because they are not in our hands now.
Oh, so they were not handed to the ambulance at all?
Not at all.
Okay, but you saw those buses?
Yes, we actually inspected them, and then we gave our report on them.
Okay. So how many buses would make us work and respond to emergencies like, we are required to? Currently,
if you look at the number of stations that we have, which are about 134 stations across the country, in that case, we need not less than 200 ambulances because we must always have a backup so that if some has a problem, then we can replace. Or if another one comes to the workshop for servicing, then we can quickly replace with another one so that at any point in time, there will be an ambulance available at every station. And one thing is, if all the stations have the ambulance working, in that one, it also improves our response time. When we say response time, that's the time that the call is received and the time that the ambulance will move from the station to the location where the incident is. Because internationally, we are supposed to be working less than 8 minutes.
Less than 8 minutes?
Yes.
No matter where I am?
Yes, you should be able to get the ambulance within the next 8 minutes.
What are you working with right now?
But currently, our response time is around between 15 and 20 minutes, just because most of the stations don't have ambulance. So sometimes you need to call an ambulance from a very long distance to respond to your case.
So let's use the classic case, tragedy though, the atomic junction gas explosion.
Yeah.
When were you called and how long did it take you to get there?
Thank you very much. This particular case, ambulance service was very prompt. Okay. The first call to our dispatch center was received at 19:16 hours. In other words, 7:16 p.m. Okay. That's the time that we received the call. And immediately the call came in. The first 2 ambulances were dispatched at 19:17 hours. That is 7.
Just a minute after the call came?
Just a minute after the call came, the first 2 ambulances were dispatched to the scene. And within the next 5 to 10 minutes, they were already at the scene.
Really?
Yes.
Where did they come from?
One was from Accra Central. Okay. But because at that time the road was a bit free, they were able to get there on time. Okay. And quickly they responded. And so when they got to the scene, after their assessment of the situation, then they sent assistance message to the dispatch center. When it's assistance message, after assessing the scene, they realized that there's the need for additional ambulances. So assistance message was communicated to the dispatch center, and additional 3 ambulances were also dispatched to the scene, making 5 at that point in time.
Were they enough?
Yes,
for
at
the,
that
for
time,
the incident that was witnessed.
they were not enough anyway, because if you look at the number of casualties, but at that point in time, those 5 ambulances that came were able to contain the situation. And for all you know, not all the cases were within that perimeter. Some of the injuries that we heard that were people sustained were outside. Some were even at the Legon campus and other places. But within the perimeter where the actual incident happened, our personnel were there to be were there, and they were able to manage the situation.
How many people can an ambulance take at any point in time?
First, the critically injured or ill person has to lie, and for that matter, there is only 1 trolley in the ambulance. So it contains only 1 trolley that the person will lie on. But if there are any walking wounded, when we say walking wounded, people who are not seriously injured but they can walk into the ambulance, then we can pick 2 additional people to sit, and then accompanied by the one who is on the trolley, making at least 3 people, and then they will be transported to the hospital.
There was an interesting episode on the Sunday after the Saturday explosion. I just want us to take a, let's watch this. I'll come back to you and ask if there are any follow-ups.
All right.
Yeah.
Right now, these are live pictures. She was just moved. We're not certain what has happened to her, but that's live pictures where it looks like she's actually collapsed suddenly. We're not sure what has happened, but this is the situation over here at the Atomic Junction area where the explosion happened. So you can tell that it's been quite intense. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of related incidents that are happening. There's also incidents that are happening on the side that are not connected. People
Okay, so the visual, what you've just seen was a woman who was just watching with many others a day after the incident, and she just collapsed. So, but fortunately, the ambulance service was just right there. I think the follow-up was, do we know what happened to the woman?
Yeah. You see, this particular incident, the actual day that the incident happened, I'm told that her house was just close by, so they all left the place and later came in the night. So for the whole day or the whole night, she was away. She came the next morning, no eating, nothing, and then she came to observe what was still going on. And so as immediately that she collapsed, then our personnel, because of the incident, our personnel were on standby there throughout the day. And so they were able to manage her and then send her to the hospital.
Okay. But she's okay?
Yeah, for now, she's okay.
Okay. Yeah. Is it your business to do follow-ups, you know, to find out what happened to the patients
it's very important. Yes, we sometimes do the actual follow-up to the hospital. Especially for this particular incidents, our people were going back to the hospitals, and even we took some names of those who were there and how far they have been able to. And another way of we also doing follow-up is that when they take the information of the patient, we call something pre-hospital form. All the patient's information are recorded on them. And then we try to get a contact person number on the form. Okay. So these forms are brought to headquarters. And we have people who enter all this into our data, and then we analyze them. Once a while, some of these forms are randomly picked, and then we call the numbers of the relatives whose numbers are on the forms and ask them about the condition of the patient afterwards. And they always give us the feedback as to what happened to the patient at the end of the day.
Okay. So if you pick a patient, if you pick someone, what's that first aid that you begin to give the person on the bus?
It depends on so many things. It depends on the kind of injury the patient has sustained, if it is a road traffic crash or any kind of trauma. Depends on that. And if it is a medical case, it depends on the kind of medical condition that the person is up to. So it is not a complete, that this is the one way of doing it. if it is an injured person, in that case, we either have to ensure that we call something we call the ABC. You have to check the airway to see if the person's airway is cleared. Because if the airway is not cleared, it means the person cannot breathe.
Okay.
And that can lead to death.
So you'll be checking
so you check the airway, you check the breathing, you check the circulation to see if all those things
all
are
on the bus while the car is trying to, the
even
ambulance is trying to get to the hospital.
At the incident, those things are checked at the incident to ensure that the person, whether it is the person is actually, what do you call it? The person is conscious or unconscious.
Okay.
So if the person is conscious, then if the person's breathing is not adequate, then we support the person's breathing with oxygen. As one of the documentary, you saw the guy explaining all those things to the So then the person will be transported to the hospital. But en route to the hospital, we continue what we call the secondary assessment. We try to continue to assess the patient's vital signs. In this case, we check about the temperature, we check about the pulse, we check about the blood pressure of the patient to see whether it is within the acceptable limits. Where it's not within the acceptable limits, then the necessary interventions are made until we get to the hospital. And then when we get to the hospital, then the team will first give an oral report to the in charge or whoever is receiving the patient.
So it's just like we see in the CSIs.
Yes.
Like the TV series that we watch,
yes.
where you know, somebody is taken. Okay, I think it's the hospital-related series where a patient is taken, and then when they are handing over, the person just briefs the doctor who takes charge. Blah 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 blah.
So we provide that information. Then, in addition, the PCR form that was filled will also be given to the doctor. Then he or she will read through to know what kind of interventions that we provided for the patient. And then after that, they will sign our form indicating that they have now taken over the patient from the ambulance.
In wrapping up our conversation, and I must say that my colleague Martha Krentolata has done, Aqua has done an amazing job because this is a story that is usually told in bits and pieces. So we don't get to appreciate the exact work that you do, but now we do. What are some of the things that you want us to know right now? What are the tips that you will leave us in terms of what we must know about the ambulance service, including all your hotlines?
Okay, thank you very much. The ambulance service have come so far because we have all contributed to ensure that we have emergency medical service in our country that works. But we can only perform these duties to the best of our ability if we have all the necessary resources. And for now, we don't have any dedicated source of funding. So if we are asking about the number of ambulances working, because we don't have any dedicated source of funds, when sometimes some of the vehicles break down, it takes a very long time before we get funds to bring them back on road. So a very dedicated source of funding is very important to that. Recently, we have launched Operation Save a Soul, if you have heard of it.
Captain Smart on Adum FM is one of your ambassadors.
Where we are trying to ask all Ghanaians and everybody living in Ghana to contribute something in support of National Ambulance Service so that we can have enough funds to maintain our ambulances and equipment. And
so
also
money
to
is
improve.
definitely a big issue.
And then the issue of no birth syndrome in our hospitals is also another challenge that we are seeing how best the Ghana Health Service and other collaborators will come together to help us so that if the hospital emergency system is improved, then certainly it's also going to enhance our work. Because when you get a patient to the place and they are also having beds to receive the patient, our trolleys will not be seized. And then we can go back and then convey another person who needs our help also back to the hospital. And anybody who needs an ambulance service, you only need to dial the 193. 193. The 193 is on all the networks that we have in the country. MTN, Tigo, Vodafone, any of the
And it doesn't
networks.
matter where you are in the country.
Not at all.
You just have to dial
193. It will go to our dispatch center. And then they will interrogate you to know exactly what the problem is.
But I have a little concern. Whilst they interrogate me, I have an emergency.
Yes. You know why?
Because you're still keeping me on the phone.
They have to do that. Your case will determine what kind of personnel and the type of ambulance to move to your location. If you remember, my boss was explaining the two types of ambulances, the advanced life support ambulance and basic life support ambulance.
Yeah.
So if the person needs an advanced care, and we don't ask you for you to provide us that information, then they may send an ambulance with a team who may not be able to manage your situation.
Okay.
That's
so
why we need to interrogate you and get some information about the patient. And imagine the patient is an asthmatic patient. Certainly you need to have an oxygen in your ambulance. So if the closest ambulance is not having oxygen, it means they have to transport an dispatch an ambulance
from somewhere else
will be able to manage your situation.
Okay.
So they have to know a little bit of your condition to be able to know what kind of ambulance to be dispatched into your.
I get you, absolutely. Finally.
Yes.
Do they have to charge?
Not
Do I
at
have
all.
to pay something when
Not
I call
at
the
all.
ambulance service and they
You
pick
see,
me up?
we have emergency cases. For emergency cases, for instance, if there's road traffic crash and people are injured and we need to be called to come to their aid, it's free of charge. But because, as I said earlier, we don't have any dedicated funding, and for that matter, sometimes it becomes very serious for us to get enough funds to provide the necessary fueling of the ambulance. When it is a referral from, let's say, somebody needs a referral from, let's say, Somania to Kolebu, he is already well,
the patients at that particular facility.
At that facility.
Okay.
In that case, we ask the patients to support us with a little fuel to enable them to transport the person from all the way from Somania to Kolebu.
Okay.
So that's the only time that you will hear that the ambulance service have asked for something small as fuel support. But in actual fact, our services are free because we are under government subvention.
You know, in Ghana, they say the thing is free, but something small will definitely come into the picture. But we are grateful so much. Thank you so much for your time.
You're
Thank you for being here. Thank you for allowing Martha into your space to tell us this story. You see, we've done a good job because we didn't pay.
That's fantastic.
You didn't pay anything for this.
That's fantastic. we are also very grateful to JoyNews for what you've done for us, and I'm sure now the public is becoming very much aware of our role as emergency medical service in the country.
Sure.
Because without National Ambulance Service, I can tell you that a lot of people might have lost their lives by now, especially on maternal cases. Maternal cases, where we have to transport pregnant women in labor, those with complications from the rural areas into tertiary hospitals where they can have access to advanced health.
Thank you very much. We're grateful to Martha Aqua for bringing us the emergency exit. We hope that you've enjoyed it. We've educated ourselves enough, and get that number. I don't know, wherever you write it, keep it. It's 193. That's the emergency number to the ambulance service. Only call when there are emergencies. Now, this morning, story broke that the Executive Secretary of the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission had been sacked. And so Maxwell Agbagba went to the offices of the PRC to find out what the workers think about this. Here's Maxwell Agbagba, out and about, roving on the PRC boss sacking.
Mr. Samuel Sapon has been relieved of his position as the Executive Secretary for the Public Utility Regulatory Commission. It comes on the back of many protests by the workers here to get him sacked. Today we are here. A lot of them are in their white clothes, celebrating sort of, the termination of the appointment of Mr. Sapon. But I have with me here what was it like when you heard the news yesterday?
Yeah, it's a surprise. Yes.
What's the surprise? You've been calling for this for a very long time.
Because we started this for quite some time now, and we were not hearing anything from the appointing authorities. So yesterday when we heard that the ultimate has happened, I was surprised, but I was quite relieved then.
Let me find out from you also, Emmanuel. You are also an